thought is that we are going to go on a journey together. So let's go through the customer's problem to its resolvement and the key takeaways that we got from this project. And at the end as well, we will have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, we can take them at the end. So the troubled customer. We had a customer contact us at Knightec. They said that they had a great opportunity presented to them. They had the opportunity of releasing some video-on-demand content, and they had an existing platform, a legacy system, but it could not handle the kind of loads that they were expecting this time around. So they came to us at Knightec, since we have a proven track record of making the impossible possible. And we saw this as a great opportunity for us as well. And as mentioned, we had a lot of fun doing it on top of that. So I mentioned that they had a legacy system, and it had two main issues. So going forward now, creating this new application, they had two high-level goals for us. The first one was that this new system should scale. It should handle high traffic volumes, and in their case, it was about 50,000 users. Also, the other high-level goal was that if you don't have any traffic, this system should not be costing you anything. And all of this sounds perfect for a serverless application, right? So that's what we decided on actually implementing. But besides the high-level goals, we of course had a certain challenge here. And it was that we had to develop a new web application from the ground up, consisting of both a front-end and a backend. And on top of that, it was supposed to be a white label solution because this platform would be reused for other customer partnerships that this customer had. And for the use cases, just to give somewhat of a feeling of what the user could do in the system, we can start off with the first case. So the video content, it should be presented or displayed or visualized on the web in the web application. And it could either be single video files or it could be a bundle of videos. So for example, you could purchase a package or a bundle giving you access to 5 different VODs at once. And of course, it kind of follows. If you have purchased anything, you want access to it. So in this case, we would have to allow the user to redeem a voucher code in order to unlock content. And naturally, following that again, if you have access to it, you would like to stream it. So the content that you have access to should be streamable for you. And finally, kind of a stretch goal, but this system that we were supposed to develop from the ground up, it should be open for extension when it came to adding support for future live streaming. This was an important topic for them, but as we so first of all, the focus was to think about video-on-demand files, so VODs. Live streaming was not on the table for this solution at once, but in the near future, it was something that was bound to happen. Besides that, I mentioned that they had this legacy system that could not scale correctly. It could not handle the expected load. And it had a few things that we had to integrate against. So I mentioned that the user could gain access to content by using their voucher code. And this voucher code was something that the user could purchase on a separate platform. And of course, for this platform that we were to develop, we would have to have some knowledge of these voucher codes. So we would have to integrate against that. And the second system was that they had an existing deal with a third-party transcoding service. So for this project, we did not have the opportunity to take a look at, for example, Amazon Elastic Transcoder. And then the final part of the challenge was that we are going live in 3 weeks. And thankfully, this is a highly unusual request from a customer. But we rose to the challenge and we had a lot of fun on the way. So over to the implementation phase. How did we actually manage to build this high volume streaming platform in such a short time frame? To start off with the team, we had 3 people on the front end, 2 in the back end, and then we had 1 project manager / product owner helping us out with the requirements. And the team was a mix of both on-site workers and working from home. And coronavirus had just started to spread in Sweden. And so the exodus to working from home had started. But as a team, we focused heavily on rapid prototyping and tight communication loops because we did not have the time to make mistakes and start over. Everything had to click at once. So over to the more technical stuff, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the front end. I'm just going to state that language-wise, we use TypeScript because it's the most commonly used language at Knightec for cloud projects. And the front-end team excelled in Angular, so it was kind of a natural choice when it came to that. With Angular, you kind of get RxJS and Sass and so on. We used Jest for some unit testing, and then for a better developer experience, we used ESLint and Prettier for linting and automatic code formatting. Now over to the backend. Perhaps that's a bit more exciting. We use TypeScript here as well, just to have the same language on both parts of the system. We use the serverless framework for managing the Lambdas and creating the API gateway and its integrations. And then when it comes to the serverless services or concept, we used a few services on AWS, namely S3, Cloudfront, of course, with origin access identity enabled and signed cookies for delivering content. Lambda, API gateway, and then DynamoDB as the main backing store in this project. And with it, we have an optional support for a Dynamo accelerator cluster, so caching of the Dynamo data. And we can visualize this in this diagram. So we see here that, of course, start off with the user as always, and they could be on the computer, on the mobile, or perhaps they would want to stream content using Apple TV or using Chromecast. But either way, they are going through Cloudfront, and we have one origin behind it. So on S3, we both have video stream segments and audio segments that the third-party provider essentially dumped into a bucket and a certain folder. We also had the web application store there, so it got served through Cloudfront. The bucket was, of course, not public or anything, but it was secured and only Cloudfront should be able to deliver it. When it comes to the web application that's being served, it talks to the backend through the API gateway, as one can expect. It exposes different endpoints for streams, for vouchers, and so on. And then connected to that is Lambda, where we add Lambda functions for listing streams, getting details about a specific stream or VOD, claiming or redeeming your voucher that you had pre-purchased, and all of that we add in the backing store in form of DynamoDB. And the DynamoDB model is basically a single table solution. It scales quite well, and it's also nice to have a stateless connection to the database. And And between the compute and the storage, we had DAX, the Dynamo Accelerator. So this application was quite read intensive during heavy traffic, and the DAX cache solved it quite neatly. If we did not use the DAX cache, we would have to provision about 2,000 RCUs for 50,000 users. But with the cache, only 20 RCUs were being used. So a huge difference. And I spoke about on the last slide about signed cookies. So we should not be leaking videos. You should only have, the proper access in order to actually stream it. And we achieve that by using signed cookies on Cloudfront. And the user on a certain unit, on a certain device, would get the signed cookie from the backend if they claimed their voucher. And all of the vouchers were imported to the system, so we had knowledge about what vouchers existed, and also whether they had been used already or not, and what kind of content it would unlock. And I spoke briefly about the database model. Perhaps there will be some questions later on, but as a reference, I would say look up Alex Debris. He's had several AWS reInvent talks, and they are super good about how to think when actually working with DynamoDB and kind of, tips and tricks and so on. So when it came to the code, the backend was developed using TDD, test-driven development, focused heavily on a service repository pattern. It's 3-tier layer. And we focused heavily on doing unit testing and also integration testing just to catch errors early on and get a fast feedback loop for the developer. And I also mentioned before that this new platform should be a white label solution. So, So we focused heavily on infrastructure as code using CloudFormation, because deploying this should not require someone going into the console on AWS, having the knowledge of setting everything up by hand. This should be super easy for anyone to actually deploy a new instance of. And then finally, we had ESLint interpreter on the backend as well for a better developer experience. So at the end of the implementation phase, we of course had to start doing some load tests to see if we could actually scale correctly. And we did that according to the empirical rule, as it is called. And this kind of pattern was something that the customer has seen repeatedly for their newly released content before, where some people are early starts, they come in and start waiting for the content to be released. And then, as it is being released, the majority of the people will arrive. So using this model, we calculated that 68% of the users would arrive over approximately 40 seconds. And for us, for our 50,000 users use case, that is about 850 requests per second that we would have to support. And all of the tests that we executed showed us that we did not have any bottlenecks or choking points in the system. It scaled correctly, and everything worked. So the first acceptance criteria or high level of goal that we had of 50,000 users, it was met. And the second goal was that this solution should not have a fixed price each month. Depending on the load on the system, the cost should scale accordingly or be adjusted accordingly. And we saw that, if we don't have any events on the site, we don't release any content, then we basically have no costs because nothing is being used. Everything is scaled down. And if we have a large event with a lot of people coming and starting to stream, 99% of the costs are basically video distribution via Cloudfront. So the second goal that we had, pay as you go, was met as well. The system fulfilled both criteria that the customer had set. So showtime, we had to go live. We had 3 weeks of development and testing, not a lot of time. So how did it go? Actually, it went great, except for one mistake, because I guess that you cannot truly release anything without doing something wrong, right? And in this case, it was connected to the voucher codes that I talked about. So people could pre-purchase voucher codes and then claim them in the web application that we developed. And we had to import these voucher codes. And all of these codes were written directly to the DynamoDB table. So it did not use any of the service functions in the code, which cleaned the data and transformed it to a certain format and so on. And in the case here, the voucher codes had mixed case in the import. So the source data was mixed case. And since DynamoDB hash keys are case sensitive and the service repository assumed that all keys are uppercase keys for the hash key, that's not a good combination to have. So for us, we saw that some customers had trouble claiming their voucher code that they had purchased because most of the people either wrote the voucher exactly as it was stated on their receipt, or they copy-pasted it into the web application, which made the case match in the database, allowing them to, claim the voucher and actually get access to the content and start streaming. But for a certain subset of customers who probably wrote the voucher, directly into the input box, they had trouble claiming the voucher, and therefore they did not get access to the content, which they should have access to. So what we did was that we monitored the logs in CloudWatch, and on the fly, we identified so-called case failures, where we saw that the customer had a correct voucher, but the case was wrong. So we fixed that on the fly, and all in all, the event was successful and people were happy. And of course, immediately after the event, when these VOD files had been released and actually served to people, we immediately patched it in the code as well. So in some sense, we were kind of lucky because this could have gone much worse. So some key takeaways for us. And I think the first one we know by now, right? Cloud and serverless is awesome. Also, as always, communication is key. Coronavirus had just started the exodus to working from home. So we did not have the luxury of sitting in the same room, which would have been nice since we had such a tight deadline. It's so easy to just shout in the room, hey, I changed this endpoint or whatever. You have to think about this now in the front end, etc. So that kind of thing we did not have. And I think the routines for that kind of mix of on-site and remote working under such a tight deadline, it hadn't been streamlined yet. It was not optimized. So I think there was some breakdown in the communication sense. Also, code reviews are great and should always be done, even in the last moment. The issue that we saw with the voucher codes that got imported as a mixed case, it was pushed in the 11th hour. It did not go through any code review. And if it had been, it would have been caught, and we would not have had any issues at all with the release of the system. Also, most often, it's not the technology that is hard. And I think it's kind of ironic in a sense, I guess. I mean, we had such a tight deadline, and I expected, the tech to be the hard thing. But then the only issue that we had, it essentially boils down to a human error, because the technology was not that hard to work with. And finally, a working, profitable product can be made in just 3 weeks, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. I mean, 3 weeks is not a lot of time, but still creating an entirely new system, actually delivering video and audio out to people on their TV, on their phone, on their computer. I mean, it's simply awesome. So that was that. Thanks for listening, people.